Boston winter mornings are harsh. As weak sunlight filtered through the window and dimly lit the floor, Melanie Wilson was brewing coffee in her apartment kitchen. On the counter lay her laptop, still open to the marketing proposal she had been working on until late last night. Today was her birthday, but Melanie herself was hardly aware of it as she went through her morning routine. Her small studio apartment, characterized by minimalist decor and an organized workspace, reflected her practical personality. The phone rang, displaying an incoming call from her mother, Diane. Melanie answered with a sigh. "Good morning, Mom." "Melanie, are you up? I've planned a special dinner tonight for Brenda at that fancy restaurant in Central Park, La Maison. I made reservations for 7 o'clock, so don't be late." Diane's voice was filled with excitement. Melanie paused for a moment and checked her calendar. There was a modest note that read birthday. "Tonight, all right," Melanie replied quietly. "What are we celebrating?" "Why, don't you know? Brenda got promoted to Associate Director of Marketing at Columbia Enterprises. It's quite the promotion. That girl is always so impressive." "Yes, that's wonderful," Melanie responded flatly. "I'll be there." After hanging up, she gazed out the window. Snow had begun to fall. Melanie picked up her mug and took a sip of hot coffee. The bitter taste passing through her throat strangely matched her complex emotions. Melanie had become an independent marketing consultant 5 years ago. After 10 years of experience at a major advertising agency, she had steadily built her client base and established a quiet reputation in the industry. However, her career success was invisible to her family. Especially to her father Thomas, who couldn't understand his daughter's choice not to work for a stable company. Meanwhile, her sister Brenda had always been the family's pride. After graduating from Harvard University, she immediately joined Columbia Enterprises, a large corporation, and had been rapidly climbing the corporate ladder. Her parents' conversations always centered around Brenda's success stories, and family gatherings had become celebrations of her achievements. Melanie closed her laptop and placed it in her work bag. Today she had a meeting with an important client, where she planned to make the final proposal for a major project she had been secretly preparing. This project had been conducted anonymously and had the potential to significantly impact the industry if successful. However, she had no intention of sharing this fact with her family. Before leaving the apartment, she paused in front of a small mirror. Looking at herself in a tasteful, subdued suit, Melanie gave herself a small smile. "Today is your day, Melanie," she whispered to herself. "Even if no one else remembers." In the taxi heading to the office building, she recalled her last conversation with her parents. It had been during a family lunch the previous Sunday. "Melanie, at your age, shouldn't you be looking for a stable job?" her father Thomas had said in his usual stern tone. "Look at Brenda. She's building a secure career path. Freelancing isn't a job that will last forever." "I'm not a freelancer, Dad. I'm an independent consultant," Melanie had replied calmly. "And business is good. But it's nothing compared to a position at a big company like Brenda's," her mother Diane had remarked while setting down her teacup. "They're saying she's the future of the company." Melanie had just smiled and changed the subject. She had given up trying to prove her success to them years ago. The taxi arrived at its destination. Melanie took a deep breath and prepared for her important presentation. As dusk fell on Manhattan, the snow had stopped, and a cold wind swept through the streets instead. Melanie stepped out of a taxi and stood at the elegant entrance of La Maison. The warm light from the luxury restaurant melded into the winter darkness. "Happy birthday to myself," she murmured softly. The meetings with her client that had continued since morning were a huge success. When her presentation ended, there was a moment of silence in the conference room, followed by warm applause. The client representative had been impressed with her proposal and urged her to finalize the contract as soon as possible. But now, her heart was filled with mixed emotions. A small hope that her family might have remembered her birthday. And at the same time, a suspicion that this would just be another gathering to celebrate Brenda's success. Melanie took a deep breath and entered the restaurant. "Reservation for Wilson, please." The hostess guided her to a private room at the back. When the door opened, Melanie paused for a moment. The room was decorated lavishly, with a large banner on the table that read, "Congratulations, future CEO." Elegant flowers and bottles of expensive champagne were placed in the center of the table, and the entire room was enveloped in a celebratory atmosphere. Her parents and Brenda were already seated, and they all looked up when Melanie entered. "Melanie, you're finally here." Her mother Diane stood up and embraced her. "Good thing you wore a nice outfit. It's a special night, after all." "Sorry I'm late," Melanie replied quietly. A small hope had sprouted in her heart. Perhaps this was a surprise celebration for her birthday. Maybe the future CEO on the banner was an acknowledgement of her success as an independent consultant. Melanie smiled and turned to her father. "Good evening, Dad." "Hello, Melanie. How's work going?" Thomas asked formally. His eyes were already fixed on Brenda, who was wearing a glittering dress and looked more confident than ever. "Did you all remember?" Melanie asked hopefully. "My birthday, do you remember?" The conversation stopped for a moment. Diane started to speak but faltered. Today? This is for your sister's promotion." She looked at Thomas with a confused expression. "Of course I know." Brenda interrupted. "But my success is more important." She raised her champagne glass with a laugh. "Everyone, toast to me. The next generation leader of Columbia Enterprises." Melanie's smile froze as she surveyed the table decorations. There were multiple congratulatory cards, but all were addressed to Brenda, "Our pride, to your wonderful success." Her name was nowhere to be found. "Congratulations, Brenda," Melanie said quietly. There was no emotion in her voice. Brenda continued talking excitedly. "My new position comes with a private office. And I'll have a team of 20 people under me. The CEO told me directly, you are the future leader of this company." "That's truly wonderful, Brenda," Diane's eyes shone. "The company recognizes your talent and sense." "It's in the bloodline," Thomas proudly declared. "She carries the Wilson family blood." Melanie picked up her wine glass and took a sip. She felt something cold hardening in her chest. For years, she thought she had grown accustomed to her family's indifference. But tonight, on her birthday, the reality of being completely ignored was more painful than she had imagined. Even as the waiter brought the food, the conversation remained filled with tales of Brenda's success. Melanie ate silently, barely tasting the food. Her mind was elsewhere. The success of today's presentation, and the new project starting tomorrow. The success she had secretly built up. Achievements unknown to her family but beginning to be recognized in the industry. When dessert was served, a special cake appeared for Brenda. A chocolate plate decorated with "Celebrating Future Success" adorned the top of the cake. "Let's make a toast," Diane exclaimed. "To our pride, Brenda's brilliant future." As everyone raised their glasses, Melanie slowly stood up. A quiet determination was forming within her. "Congratulations," she said quietly. "Excuse me." "Oh, Melanie. What about dessert?" Diane asked with surprise. "I'm not in the mood," Melanie picked up her bag. "I have an early start tomorrow." "Work," Thomas said with a hint of sarcasm. "Got a small project?" Melanie didn't answer and quietly left the room. No one tried to stop her. As she walked through the restaurant lobby, she took deep breaths to hold back tears. When the cold outside air hit her cheeks, the tears finally spilled over. She hailed a taxi, gave her apartment address, and sank deep into the back seat. "Are you okay?" The driver looked back with concern. "I'm fine," Melanie answered as she wiped away her tears. "Because this is the last time." As the taxi drove through the lights of Manhattan, a firm resolve was growing in Melanie's heart. Until now, she had silently accepted her family's neglect and dismissal. But tonight, she realized it was time to draw a boundary. Along with the new project starting tomorrow, her life was about to enter a new chapter. Back at her apartment, Melanie picked up her phone and sent an email confirming tomorrow's meeting. Pouring herself a glass of wine, she smiled genuinely for the first time. "Happy birthday, Melanie," she said to herself. As the morning sun began to filter between Boston's skyscrapers, Melanie was already in the elevator of an office building. She pressed the button for the 35th floor and took a deep breath. Today might be the day that changed her life. Shaking off the bitter memories of last night, she took out her smartphone and reviewed the final presentation materials. This project, which she had been working on anonymously for 6 months, had been kept secret at the client's request. It was to be the core of the next-generation marketing strategy for Global Communications International, a major media company. When the elevator doors opened, Melanie stepped into a spacious reception area. Famous artists' works adorned the walls, and the latest designer furniture filled the waiting space. "Ms. Wilson, we've been expecting you." A young receptionist stood up and guided her to the conference room. About 10 executives had already gathered in the large glass-walled room. The white-haired man seated in the center stood up when he saw Melanie. "Ms. Melanie Wilson, at last we meet." Robert Harrison, founder and CEO of GCI, extended his hand. "I've been looking forward to this day since reading your proposal." Melanie smiled calmly and shook his hand. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Harrison. Everyone, let me introduce you to the genius behind Project Revival," Harrison said to the attendees. For 6 months, her identity has been kept secret, but today that changes. The projector started up, and Melanie stood. She didn't feel nervous. Years of experience and preparation had trained her for this moment. "Good morning, everyone. Today I'll present the final presentation of eRevival." For the next 90 minutes, Melanie explained the comprehensive marketing strategy she had designed. An innovative approach that fused digital platforms with traditional media, new content strategies to engage younger generations, and market forecasts based on extensive data analysis. Her proposal went beyond just a marketing campaign to include a vision for restructuring GCI's entire business. When the presentation ended, the room fell silent. Melanie felt a moment of anxiety, but then Harrison began to applaud loudly, and the other executives followed. "Brilliant," Harrison stood up and approached Melanie. "My intuition was right. Ms. Wilson, you are exactly what GCI needs." During a separate meeting over lunch, Harrison made Melanie a surprising offer. "I want you to take the position of director of our newly established Creative Innovation Division. We'll start at an annual salary of $500,000. Additionally, stock options will be provided as performance bonuses." Melanie was momentarily speechless. The amount offered was 3 times what she had expected. "Thank you, I'll consider it," she replied calmly. "Of course. I understand that a talented consultant like you must have offers from other companies." Harrison showed understanding. "By the way, are you familiar with Columbia Enterprises' new division?" Melanie tilted her head. "My sister works there." "Is that so?" Harrison said with interest. "Actually, their new digital marketing division was established to implement parts of your proposal. Columbia Enterprises is a subsidiary of GCI." Dots connected in Melanie's mind. Brenda's sudden promotion. It had emerged from Melanie's own project. Though she felt the ironic twist of fate, she maintained her professional demeanor. "Thank you for your consideration. I'll give you my answer by the weekend." As she left the office, Melanie's smartphone rang. It was an editor from the International Business Times. "Ms. Wilson, we'd like to request an interview about your project with GCI." The next morning, Melanie opened her apartment door to find the newspaper delivery. The latest issue of the International Business Times featured her photo prominently on the cover, with the headline, "Marketing's Hidden Genius, Melanie Wilson Leads GCI's Revolution." The phone started ringing 10 minutes later. The first call was from her mother. Melanie didn't answer and decided to take a shower. The phone continued to ring, and notification sounds from emails and text messages intermittently echoed. Feeling refreshed as she left the bathroom, Melanie checked her voicemail. "Melanie, I saw the article. Why didn't you tell us? Such a big project." Her mother's voice was filled with confusion and surprise. Next was her father. "Melanie, call me right away. I need to hear about this, a contract with GCI? Why didn't you tell us?" Last was Brenda. Her voice was trembling. "Sis, is it true that my promotion was part of your project? I was called in by my boss this morning, everyone's talking about the article." Call me." Melanie smiled quietly as she brewed coffee. She picked up her cell phone and called Harrison at GCI. "I accept the offer," she said calmly. "But I have one condition. I'd like the new division to be set up in a separate office." 3 days later, Melanie received the keys to her new office. It was a spacious area on the 38th floor of a skyscraper in Boston's financial district, with large windows overlooking the sea. Her new team was scheduled to join next week, and she had already recruited talented professionals from the industry. "Ms. Wilson, a package for you." The receptionist brought in a large bouquet. The card contained a message from her parents: "We are proud. Let's talk." After reading the card, Melanie placed it in a drawer. Next, she opened an unread message from Brenda. "Sis, congratulations. I didn't know that my promotion was part of your plan. The entire company is buzzing about you. Everyone's attitude toward me changed when they found out I'm your sister. Can we talk?" Melanie didn't reply and gazed at the view of the city spread out from the window. The phone rang again, this time from her mother. She didn't answer that either, quietly blocking the incoming call. At dusk, she sat in her new office chair, looking at the contract with GCI she had signed yesterday. It symbolized the beginning of her new life. Multiple unread messages and unanswered calls from her family were displayed on her smartphone, but she continued to ignore them. She stared at her reflection in the large glass window. A confident expression, straight posture, and a slight smile. There was the image of a woman who continues to move forward, carrying past wounds and disappointments. "Your value doesn't depend on others' approval," she reminded herself. "Especially not from people who refuse to truly see you." 3 months later, Boston was bathed in early summer sunlight. From Melanie's new office, she could see yachts with white sails spread wide as they docked in the harbor. She sat at her desk, making final adjustments to a marketing strategy. The Creative Innovation Division was growing rapidly under her leadership. Melanie's innovative approach had attracted industry attention, and GCI's stock price had risen 30% over the past 3 months. Her team consisted of talented young professionals who respected her leadership and creative vision. "Ms. Wilson, you have a visitor," her assistant Jessica announced over the intercom. "There's no prior appointment, but she says she's your sister." Melanie paused. She had ignored all calls and messages from Brenda, but hadn't expected her to appear at the office in person. She took a deep breath and composed herself. "Send her in." A few minutes later, the door opened and Brenda entered. The confident sister she knew wasn't there. Her shoulders were slumped, there were signs of fatigue under her eyes, and even her expensive brand-name clothes looked somewhat worn. "Melanie." Brenda's voice trembled. "Thank you for seeing me." "What's wrong?" Melanie asked calmly. She remained seated behind her desk. Brenda hesitantly entered the room and sat down in the chair opposite Melanie. "I need help," she said, looking down. "What kind of help?" "Money. I have debts." Brenda's voice grew smaller. "A lot of debt." Melanie's expression didn't change, but inwardly she was surprised. She never imagined that her sister, who always boasted of success, would be facing financial problems. "How much?" $300,000, Brenda took out documents from her bag with trembling hands. "Here are the details." Melanie took the papers and looked through them. Credit card bills, collection notices from luxury brand stores for unpaid balances, and several personal loan contracts. Most had occurred in the past year. Explain, Melanie's voice was calm, but there was an unyielding strength in it. Brenda took a deep breath and began speaking, fighting back tears. After the promotion, everything changed. Suddenly, I had this huge responsibility, with high expectations from everyone. She paused momentarily, forcing out her voice. But that division was actually part of your project, and I was just a figurehead. The real vision was all yours, and I was just implementing it. And then, I couldn't handle the pressure. I rented an expensive apartment, bought luxury clothes, went to high-end restaurants with colleagues, pretending to be successful to meet everyone's expectations. Brenda looked up. Then I tried investing too, but lost everything. Our parents. I can't tell them, tears spilled from Brenda's eyes. Especially not Dad. He thinks I'm the perfect career woman. I can't disappoint his expectations. Melanie stood up and walked to the window. Have you lost your job? Not yet, but soon maybe. My performance has been declining, and my boss is dissatisfied. Especially since finding out about you. She continued hesitantly. Actually, I've been trying to steal your ideas recently. Melanie turned around. What do you mean? I tried contacting someone on your team to get inside information on new projects. Brenda's voice grew smaller. I was willing to do anything to save my career. Melanie returned to her desk and opened her laptop. I know, she said quietly. I know that you contacted Jason Parker. He's new to my team, but he reported everything to me. Melanie looked at the screen and typed something. I also knew about your debts. I've been investigating your activities. Brenda stared at her sister with a stunned expression. Why? Self-defense, Melanie replied calmly. And I investigated our parents too. Our parents? Yes. You said they're financially struggling. That's a lie too. Melanie handed Brenda a printout. This is Dad's investment portfolio. He has plenty of assets. Are our parents trying to get you to borrow money from me? Brenda stared at the document, at a loss for words. After a while, she said in a small voice, I'm sorry. I lied. Our parents could help me, but I couldn't ask them. I was too ashamed. She looked up and met Melanie's eyes. But there's another reason I came to you. What? You've always been stronger than me. Always going your own way. Never giving in to family pressure. Brenda covered her face with her hands. That's why I was jealous of you. Even with our parents treating me special, I really wanted your strength. Melanie, hiding her emotions, took an envelope from her desk drawer. Look at this, she handed Brenda several photos. They were childhood photos of the sisters. 8-year-old Melanie and 1-year-old Brenda. Their parents were holding baby Brenda, while Melanie stood alone a little distance away. I was always on the outside. You were always at the center of our parents' affection, Melanie said quietly. From the moment you were born, you were their pride. I was an accessory. That's not true. Brenda said, wiping her tears. It is. But that made me stronger. Melanie took a pen and began writing a check. I'll lend you the money to pay off your debts. I'll have a contract drawn up with a repayment plan. No interest, but I expect you to repay it without fail. Really? Sis, thank you. Brenda's voice mixed relief and surprise. But there's one condition, Melanie said as she placed the check in an envelope. We need to reconsider our family relationship. I won't accept being treated as I was before. I understand. Brenda nodded slightly. Sis, I'm truly sorry. I should have realized sooner. We can't change the past. But the future is different. Melanie handed the envelope to Brenda and stood up. Live your own life from now on, Brenda. not for others' expectations. For the first time, Brenda looked at Melanie with genuine respect. There was no envy or competitiveness, just pure reverence. "I want to be like you," she said quietly. "You don't need to be. Be yourself." Melanie gazed at the Boston skyline outside her window. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared, but she had the strength to overcome it. And she was trying to share that strength with her sister. 1 year later, a party celebrating Melanie's birthday was being held at a restaurant on the top floor of a New York skyscraper. However, her parents were nowhere to be seen. A toast. "Congratulations, Melanie," GCI's CEO Harrison raised his champagne glass. "To the establishment of your independent consulting company and its remarkable success in its first year." The gathering included her colleagues, clients, and friends she had made in her new life. 6 months ago, Melanie had left her high-paying position at GCI to establish her own marketing consulting company, Insight Innovations. Her company quickly attracted industry attention, and she had no trouble acquiring clients. At the edge of the party, Brenda stood quietly. Accepting her sister's advice, she was recovering from last year's failures. Her debt was being steadily repaid, and she was now beginning to walk a more grounded career path. "Lovely party," Brenda approached Melanie and said. "Our parents." "I know they won't come," Melanie smiled. "Though I did invite them." 2 weeks before her birthday, Melanie had invited her parents to dinner. There, for the first time, she frankly expressed her feelings to them. The years of neglect and dismissal, and the unbalanced family relationships. Her parents tried to make excuses and deny the situation, but Melanie remained firm. "I love you, but I can't go back to the relationship we had before," she said. "I want to spend time with people who recognize my value." After that, contact from her parents ceased. Thomas's arrogance and Diane's passive attitude continued unchanged. "They won't change," Brenda said quietly. "But I have. Thanks to you." Melanie looked at her sister. In Brenda's eyes, there was no longer the competitiveness or jealousy of the past, but a pure color of gratitude. While attending therapy, she had gradually begun to face herself. "You've learned to live your own life," Melanie said. "Still a work in progress," Brenda laughed. "But like you, I'm beginning to understand that my worth isn't determined by others' evaluations." Near the end of the party, a young waitress brought in a cake. "Happy birthday, Ms. Wilson," she said shyly. I'm studying marketing. I've heard your lecture before. Someday, I want to be a successful woman like you." Melanie smiled warmly. "Believe in your own path," she said gently. "Don't try to be someone else. Be yourself." Facing the candles on the cake, Melanie reflected on the past for a moment. The sad birthday a year ago, the rejection from her family, and the courageous step she had taken. The wounds hadn't completely healed, but she had transformed that pain into fuel for growth. "Any birthday wish?" one of her friends asked. Melanie closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "It's already come true," she said, opening her eyes. "The wish to be the protagonist of my own story." As the candlelight extinguished, a new light began to illuminate her life.